this? Can I just,
Yes.
should I use it?
Yes, please.
Do I need it?
You got old
Okay.
people that, you know.
So hi. This is friendly, small but mighty, right?
Right.
Okay, I'm very happy to be here. This is the first time Ron has invited me. You're a little late to the party on that.
Yeah.
But I've been busy.
Great introduction.
Yeah, I know, I gave you a great introduction. I have been very busy. And many of you probably already know me. I have been on the Valley airwaves for since 2002. So that is what, 17 years?
Yeah.
I'm an old fart. And some people say, now that's old college talk.
So are we.
All right, so how many know my work? Oh, that's so gracious, thank you. How many came to meet me in person? That's so gracious, thank you, thank you. Hi, Ruby. All right, so I like when people ask me to talk, a lot of times they say, well, just come and just show up. And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? I already am, I've given it to the microphone, and I got to do it the next day. And of course, I've got to give for gab, but I get tired too. So what do you want me to talk about? And they, oh, Obamacare, or let's talk about impeachment, or whatever. I said, you know, you've heard so much of that with all the other pundits and hosts out there, the FISA documents, Hannity, Rachel Maddow, if you watch anything on the left. Do you really want me to pontificate on stuff you already know? What about stuff you don't know? So Ron and I chewed the fat on this, and we decided that I would talk about something that I really like to talk about. And right now it's really popular, and that is the whole world of news. How many people have ever worked or in any way have been close to the news business? In any way, writer, producer, what'd you do?
Student newspaper, kind of a student.
Good. Challenging, isn't it? You had to write, you had to get it from here, trippingly on the tongue, probably saying it out loud, and then on the typewriter or on the computer, right?
Plus typewriter times.
Okay, me too. I learned on a Smith Corona.
Rip and read.
All right, how many, broadcasting, any broadcaster? Howard, you've done some broadcasting, at least as a guest.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Writing less? Well, you know it's challenging. And I want to take us back just a little bit, not to get too heady, to a little bit of what we learn in college. This is simple now. What is news, after all? Let's take it, raise your hand. I mean, Journalism 101, the news game. What is news?
Events.
Daily events.
Current events.
What fires, murders, accidents, traffic jams.
You're close. You're getting warmer.
All the
Hold
crap.
that thought.
Accurate reporting of the events.
Well, that's the method in which we're supposed to get news out there, right? Accurate, meaning truthful. Ruby.
The happenings of the day.
The happenings of the day, otherwise current events. But what makes a current event?
What sells commercials?
Well, that's the practical side. That's not the academic side.
Yes,
But hold
that's
that
what's
thought too.
happening. That's what's happening.
Howard.
Actions of people or events in the universe or whatever.
Okay, everybody's kind of close.
Kind of close. I
Mhm.
thought it was there.
I want to take you to a little bit academic idea. News, in a nutshell, is two words. It's what's different. Has anybody ever said that to you before? I had professors that told me this, and I've never forgotten it, and they're right. If we go along merrily with whatever's happening today, let's say Sky Harbor. Planes are landing right now at Sky Harbor, right? Is that news? No, because it's not different. It's normal, it's status quo, but if we have a plane crash, that's different, right? So we go along our Ozzie and Harriet way of life in America, post-World War II, let's say, chicken in every pot, everybody's making babies, having fun, it's post-war, and all of a sudden, we get the hippie movement. Well, that's different. Long hair, wraparound skirts, smoking dope, right? So that makes the headlines, right? So when you look out on the horizon, think of it as a long number line. Remember the number line from 8th grade? You got the positive integers over here on the right, and you got the negative integers way over here on the left. Well, if America is sort of bell-shaped curve to the right, and we go along merrily, and we're not in war, we're all making money, we're making babies, things are good, and all of a sudden Vietnam hits, whew, we're going to be tacking this way, right, with the news, right? Because that's different. And what's going to sell on a newspaper? Vietnam. What's going to sell on a newspaper? Drugs, burn the bra, hippies, the Beatles. They're different, those mop tops, remember that? So it doesn't have to be tragedy, it can also be funny. It's what is different. Now, if you're running a newspaper and you want to sell newspapers or magazines, what are you going to put on your cover? The fact that planes land safely? That's a yawn snore. No, you're not. What are you going to put on your cover? I just gave it to you. What is different? Okay? So think of it as a pendulum. Way to the right, way to the left. And where were we once upon a time? If 0 is the middle of the number line, we were more in the middle with that bell-shaped curve. Remember that from statistics? And the right, we're on the right, right? Because we're right. We were on the right, the conservatives. And the left was kind of closer to us. And sometimes they were on this side of 0. And here was the bell-shaped curve. You follow me?
Yep.
Okay? Where is it today?
Extremes.
Are we way over here?
Yep.
I don't know if the conservatives are way over there, but I can tell you where the left is.
Off the cliff.
Keep going.
Till they fall off a cliff, right? So this bell-shaped curve is harder to have us come together. Now, how many happen to know? I won't dwell a lot on this, but I'd like you to think about this from old political philosophy class. How many remember Marxism in class?
Mm-hmm.
Right. How many remember a precursor philosopher to Karl Marx? Hegel. Good for you, man. What's your name? You get the gold star.
That's Joe.
Joe, that's exactly right. Hegel was the precursor to Karl Marx and said in his political philosophy, without getting it into practical terms, that society, as well as the natural, human beings, as well as the natural physics of life swings this way and then this way. So if we're already over here, that's kind of the status quo. Pretty soon, because we go through time and space, we're going to be over here. Right? Okay? That's exactly what happens. That's what happens in news. So this is the status quo, and over here we have an anti the status quo. Now he said this is the thesis. When we go over here, we get the antithesis. Just like in physics. That is absolutely true in political philosophy. It's true in history. So Karl Marx and Marxism came about because people were throwing off the old regime. The idea was, we're going to attack over here because we don't like that. And they didn't like fascists, and they didn't like people telling them what to do. And it was the body politic, the communal idea for the common man. But once it settles in with the antithesis, you kind of have a synergy, and you have a new thesis. Now, I only mention that because let's talk about today for just a minute. We have the left way over there, right? Now you think in terms of news, along comes Donald Trump. Out of the blue. Why do you suppose that happened? Synergistically. Because the thesis over there became the status quo. That became the synthesis. A new thesis, if it's there as the status quo long enough, becomes the synthesis.
But who's are you talking about? Whose is it though?
I'm talking about the left with the rise of Barack Obama and so forth. So he got his day in the hay over here on the left, and pretty soon people get itchy for something different. Okay? Kind of have to understand the concept. Exactly what happened with Karl Marx. And Hegel said you can use this in political philosophy, and people will throw off entire governments. Russian Revolution, French Revolution, American Revolution. Anyway, you get the point. I don't want to dwell on it too much. So we in the news business, we try to find what is different. Now, what is different is not the lady who has 100 cats in her bathroom. Well, yeah, that is different. But we don't lead with it. She's news of the weird. We may kick the show off and wrap up the show with something like that or something funny. But we always try to lead with something that's going to grab your attention because it's different, without losing your credibility with the journalist.
Impeach the president.
Now, let's talk about credibility. We don't live in a world where it's just, and that's the way it is. Friday, September 23rd, 1964. Who am I impersonating?
Walter Cronkite.
Walter Cronkite. And he kind of looked at the camera. All you got was this look, right?
Yep.
And he was poker face, but that's the way it is. And as he said it, dagnammit, you believed him. Who did not believe the most credible man in America? Walter Cronkite. But then along comes to challenge. Here we have something different. CBS was ABC, another alphabet. All right? So, who was the main challenger once Walter went into the sunset? Peter Jennings, who in my opinion could read a teleprompter like he just opened the phone book and it was just trippingly on the tongue. He was so loquacious. He was glib. And he too read it straight. Because here's the box, right? And they were men, and they had a deep alto or baritone voice, and they were calm. They weren't excited. They weren't throwing punditry in there. They weren't glamorizing the news. They were selling it, but they were selling it by way of a calmness. And so you go, oh, you leaned in and listened. Even if the sky was falling and we must tell the king, Peter Jennings had that kind of, and Walter Cronkite too, had that kind of subtle, pregnant pauses where you believe them, and then when the 30 minutes were over, you talk to your husband or your wife and says, the sky is falling. Peter Jennings said so. Were they alarmists? No, they were not. Were they credible? Maybe not to you, but for most of America. You know why we know? Because we know what the ratings were. We know how many Americans would tune in. Peter's long dead. We never know. I don't know where Peter's political stand was. But look at what we have today. Don Lemon, for example, and I don't mean to rap on Don Lemon particularly, he just popped into my head. He is a main anchor on a main ABC television
CNN.
cable, but high in cable, which is 24/7 news. All right? And the reason why it's important it's 24/7 news is because that's all they do. So they better be good at it. They're practicing it all day long. It's not like Walter Cronkite and then you got CBS television. Walter Cronkite, for example, was the lost leader. He didn't make money for CBS. It was the entertainment programming after Walter that made money for CBS. But people tuned in to watch him. He was so credible, and then they would stay for Archie Bunker and all those other great shows. That's not how Ted Turner set up CNN. He gave you so much news, anchors should be very good at it and very credible. But take Don Lemon. Is Don Lemon credible?
No,
Why not?
he's an asshole.
What?
He doesn't-
Better than that, Ron. You can do better than that. Why is Don Lemon, in your opinion, not credible?
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, why, oh, how do you know?
He's not a newscaster, he's an opinion editor.
Well, wait. He's on television.
I don't care.
Well, wait a minute. He looks into the camera. Why don't you believe him?
One side.
Because it's all opinion.
He's
It's all one
opinionated.
side.
He doesn't express.
Says who? Maybe his opinion, I'm challenging you here, okay? You get it? Maybe his opinion is so credible to some, but not to this crowd.
Their ratings stink. Nobody really watches.
Oh, people watch, they're on the air, they're paying their bills.
They're losing money.
What has happened much to my disappointment, because I've been in the business, I was a television anchor. Back east, when I worked back east. And I worked for a CBS affiliate, I worked for an ABC affiliate. I've worked in the business for some time. When I was coming up in the TV news ranks, I had to have a bob of a haircut, little mascara, little blush, little lip gloss, and I had to be poker faced. Friendly, not too pretty, not sexy at all, and just deliver it. That's the way it is. Is that the way it is now?
No.
So what's happened? What has happened? What has happened to credibility? Because we have now people we don't trust that are the mediator trying to give us what's different, either that way or this way.
Well, there's a lot of things that are different. One is the proliferation of news, and it's instantaneous.
What I mean by different is different than the status quo.
Okay, the other,
Yes, the scenario is different, the landscape is different, without a doubt, absolutely.
the other thing, and this kind of sounds elite, but I think the public is much better educated today than they were back then.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
Let's talk about that.
No, educated. I didn't say smart. I said educated.
Hold that thought, because we should get to that. You raise a good point, and I want to address it. Let's go back to Don Lemon.
We have to?
There are many, he's my good example du jour, okay? There are many people that think he's the bee's knees. And they think not just because he has put commentary in, and that is one thing that is different from the poker-faced anchor. But they do believe his commentary as truth. Think about that. Not as commentary, but as truth. And nothing but the truth, so help you God.
He's an opinion. It's opinion.
Why is it, exactly, sir, why is it that our main anchors, including Chris Como, have become pundits? Shame on the industry for allowing this. Shame, shame, shame. This is not good for democracy. It's not good for the viewer. You want to be a pundit? Pundits are from 9 until midnight. But the news should be straight, in my humble opinion. And I've worked in both sides of it.
It's propaganda.
I'm sorry?
It's all propaganda.
Hold it. But my question to the crowd is, I'll get to you in a minute. My question to the crowd is, when did it change? Why did it change? Who wants to take a stab at what? Because we know it's changed.
Trump.
No, it's not Trump's fault.
No, not his fault, but his fault changed.
Terry, I would say Roger Ailes had a lot to do with it.
I know, you're warm. You're really warm. Howard's onto something. Why did it change, sir? It's changed, but why?
Globalists.
I think what happened.
You're warm too.
But people don't know how to
I
think
What
anymore.
happened is that Reagan did away with the fairness doctrine, and that allowed them to just extremely biased in any direction they wanted to.
That was the door, you're right, that opened. And why was that?
Paid protesters.
Because when you keep the economy going and advertising for these big networks, you are paying the man. And what is TV news after all if it isn't a show, right? So if I'm going to communicate something, I better damn well not be boring, especially if I'm a man. Because women can put on the false eyelashes and the black miniskirt, we're less boring. And so what happened is things got sexy. Things got punditry. Because if you could make a better show, I'm going back to Ted Turner, then what is happening with Archie Bunker? And people go, oh, look at her, she's got blonde hair and great cleavage. Oh my goodness, she's pretty. I don't want to watch Archie Bunker. Oh, and she's smart too. So it became show competing with show, rather than boring old Walter Cronkite, and then you stay for the entertainment. CBS Entertainment made money for CBS. Walter Cronkite didn't. He was the lost leader. You know that term in retail, where you put something out, let's say it's Macy's, and you put something out that you know people aren't going to buy, but it's the tease to get you in the store. That's the loss leader. It's a loss to them, but it gets you, like handbags. Let's say it's $1,000 Gucci handbag. How many women are going to come in and buy that right off the bat? But it gets you in the store to buy the makeup, okay? Shoes often are lost leaders. Walter Cronkite in news was a lost leader. We don't have that anymore. So what happened is things became a show, TV news in particular. And what happened to headlines? They followed later in newspapers and magazines. So now we've got the world of a show. And how are you going to grab your audience if you're not dramatic? Now you wanted to say, sir.
So people don't think for themselves. They
Exactly.
don't question.
Spoon-fed.
So they just look at a talking head and say, well, that must be true.
And why is that? Because if that, I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah.
If that talking head, let's say it's me. If I can tell you there's little green and gray men that descended from Mars and they're at Roswell, New Mexico in Area 51, and I say it in the most credible way, and I am loquacious and I'm glib and I hammer it home every single night,
I question it. Prove it.
you would question it
Yes.
until there's a point where people don't question it.
Yeah.
Look at what happened in Nazi Germany. And there's experiments on this. There's many academic experiments on. You tell people the moon is made of green cheese enough, they'll believe you. They'll fight you at first, but then they'll come to believe you. And by the way, this is exactly what's happening today and yesterday and from the time last weekend when Nancy Pelosi said, impeachment inquiry. All of a sudden, it's not inquiry that's the I word, it's impeachment that's the I word. And you say that enough, now half the nation wants to impeach. Whereas last week it was about 25%.
This week, everybody's very sad and feeling very tragic.
My point, yes, but my point is you look at recent polling and it's about half and half. Because impeach, 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 impeach all day long. And when you have media on your side, unlike what I work in talk radio, which is the underdog, it's smarter, but it's the underdog. When you have the alphabet, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, and all of those pundits saying this, half the nation will come to believe it. And this is sad. And so people say, well, what's the truth? And I say, well, what is the truth? Now you have to work at the truth, and you have to work at the truth, and you have to work, and we have to dig deeper, and it makes my job harder, not to mention the cacophony of voices out there on the internet. We are in, folks, communication overload. And it's sickening because credible people aren't being trusted. And you say, where are they? Well, I don't know, where are they? We're kind of like in this world of the Emperor's New Clothes. Look at that beautiful outfit he has on as he's riding on the horse, the Emperor. And he's stark naked.
People are afraid
Oh,
to
but
question.
he's got clothes on.
Afraid to question.
But it's your perception. You see, it goes out of the truth arena and it gets into the perception arena. Does that make sense? Are you following? We don't have to like it, but this is where we're at. Okay, now back to the advertiser. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, in the economy, people have to make money. So, you're right. A guy in New York named Roger Ailes is looking out on the horizon and he sees this left-leaning newscast on Turner Networks, Ted Turner, Ted Turner, when I met him, was a pretty straight shooter. He just wanted an international, because we were going global at the time, in the 80s, he wanted more of an international presence. He wanted a presence in Rome, he wanted a presence in Milan, he wanted a presence in Paris and Barcelona, etc. And he thought he could sell 24/7 news. And you know what? He was right. But as this creep of punditry came into truth and delivering it, poker-faced, you've got anchors, predominantly, less so reporters, interestingly enough, anchors that are trying to sell the show. So it becomes more bum 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 ba da da dum. It becomes more of a show. And they do it with their voice, they do it with their beautiful clothes, they do it when they become celebrities. Rather than just plain old, good old-fashioned Walter Cronkite. So Roger, recognizing this, says, oh, wait a doggone minute, maybe I'll tack to the right. Because this is getting the status quo. This is becoming staid, right? It was different, Are you following me? It was different, but now what if I did something and I tacked to the right? What if I did that? Would it sell? Rather than just have some woman that came up through little markets, what if we got college professors that are beautiful on the air and beauty queens who have degrees from Columbia on the air and a lawyer like Greta Van Susteren on the air? Give her a facelift, sex her up a little bit, and she'll be on my air because she talks beautifully. She's different. And he became a huge success. Huge success. But the problem is that where is the middle line? And so, as politics became the number one news driving issue that now we're all in, it used to be news driven, issue oriented was punditry. That's what it used to be. You would read George Will's column in the paper. You would hear what somebody has to say on the Sunday shows. The McLaughlin Group, for example. That was commentary, right? But now you've got this blur, and this is not good. It's not good for the profession. It's not good for people who are trying to get the facts out there, and it's not good for democracy. We have whole representatives from the House of Representatives and from the Senate picking sides on television. So who's driving the train after all? Are they? Or is it TV news? Think about it. Because it's all in the messaging. It's in the messaging. So the point is, who is the better messenger? And sometimes the messenger can fool you. Go ahead.
There are 6 organizations that own all TV stations in our country. So I understand what you're saying.
Because
They're all Democrats.
Because when you have an opportunity for a company to buy a network, and they used to leave the news business alone. They don't anymore.
Right.
And that's the problem. You make my point.
But there are 6 companies that own, they're all Democrats.
And that's a problem too.
Right.
That's a problem too.
That's why it's hard.
Roger wasn't one of them.
I didn't say that. I said-
But he's gone, God rest him. So when the people that own the business start to want their political views trickling through the mouthpieces of anchors,
That's what's going on.
that's a problem for democracy. It's not just for, oh, where's the truth in all of this? Democracy's fine. Because it is affecting our democratic process. We have to vote. Right? We are called to be informed citizens. So how are we supposed to get our information? If it's biased from the top down. And that's not just true in TV news. It's true in magazines.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's true in newspapers.
Universities.
And people who've worked in the business for a very long time know who is credible. I can walk into a studio and I know if the guy sitting in the cubby next to me has actually done his homework. I know because I see him work. Or if they're ripping something off the internet and using somebody else's work and call it their own, which is plagiarism, of course. So here we are. It's a question of credibility. And we've moved to the left, we've moved to the right, and unfortunately, have you ever gone into somebody's office and they have those little metal balls and they kind of click, 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 click? That's where we're at. We're in these big, and bang, and bang, and bang, and bang. It used to be more tick-tock, tick-tock. Republicans, they're business people. They want to, keep the federal government low, and, they're more churchy. And the Dems, they're more kumbaya. Love everybody. But that's not the way it is anymore. I don't have to tell you that. So, let's talk about everybody being a journalist. Now we got the internet to mess up everything all the more. I remember my dad, years ago, he got into a conversation with somebody over which is the better medium, the radio or television. And the guy that he was playing poker with, I'll never forget it because they were playing poker and I was a little kid. They were playing poker in the basement. Oh, well, you know, television's here to stay, Bob. It's here to stay. My dad goes, no, I just think it's another thing. He was right. And then people say, well, the internet's here. My dad's dead now, so now people have asked me, the internet's here, so radio is going to be a thing of the past. Television, too, it's all on the internet. I go, no, it's just another thing. It's another tool. And so we have all this information. It's so cool. You can find things, it's great, but there's a lot of crap out there, too. So when you have so many voices, you also have a lot of people bogging down the ship. And it makes it harder to figure out who to believe. There's credible people out there, but how do you know? And as new news comes every single day, we have a tendency now in the polarized world that we live in that no matter what the news is, if my party says go to the right, I'm not even going to read the news. That's my choice. Let's take this Biden thing, okay? The left says the Biden thing has been looked at, disseminated. There's nothing illegal for a son to make money on a foreign kid. There's nothing illegal there. There's nothing there. And yet, and maybe that's the truth. Maybe it is. Maybe, in fact, if the right didn't pounce so hard, we would have been fine with it. Okay, there's nothing there. And you know what? We were fine with it. We were. Because that happened in the Obama administration and nobody raised an eyebrow. Where were the Republicans then? Where were the conservatives then? So it's got to get into the news, it's got to get legs, it's got to get moving, and then we pick sides.
Wait.
And we don't study it. Why don't we study it? Because first of all, it's a fire hose of news that's coming at you. It's just like, oh my God. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning studying news. I've done news all day. And it's hard, it's difficult. These are complex issues. They're vexing. I don't know everything in the world about finance. I don't know everything in the world about private equity. I don't know. And I've been at this a long time, and I'm not stupid. It's just harder. And so you go, okay, what does my party think? So I'm going to be on this side. And I would say that to the left as well. Where were you? Where were you when Trump was such an ogre? Huh? He was one of yours. I would say that people on the left, they were all in showbiz, right? Barbara Streisand, that crowd. Robert De Niro and his F-bombs. Trump was one of them. He was a showboater. Where were you saying he was so terrible? He wasn't. It's just that he won. You see? So, everybody's a journalist. Should everybody be a journalist? There's a question. Do you think so?
Why not?
Well, why or why not?
Everybody has opinions, but not everybody has facts.
Right.
That's right. That aptly put. Should everybody be a
Don't let that
journalist?
bother you.
If you're true to the word journalist, they shouldn't, because you have to be trained. Should everybody be a dentist? Should everybody be a basketball player? Well, then I would say, should basketball players be journalists or anchors on ESPN?
I think so.
They know the sport.
Played the game,
But they're taking a job away from somebody else coming up through the ranks.
but they may not know basketball.
Maybe they do. Maybe they study like me.
Well,
We see, these are the questions that are upon us now. And in some respects, there's no right answer or wrong answer. I just want to challenge your thinking a little bit. Because the profession is blurred. Now I'm going to tell you one other thing. If you're a doctor, do you need a license? Okay. If you're a CPA, you need a license? Okay. If you work on Wall Street, you need a license.
yep.
Got to pass that Series 7 and, right? Be a lawyer, you need a license. Engineer,
Yep.
architect, journalist.
How about hairstylists? You got a license there too, right?
How about journalist?
Just so you know.
In the old days, you needed a radio license to be a DJ.
You needed a radio license to be on the air,
Mm-hmm.
but not to be a DJ.
Right. Well, yeah.
DJ is talent. Do I need a license to get on the air and pontificate?
No.
No, I don't. Should I? Do you think I should?
No.
Should there be some kind of a test, some type of a vetting?
No.
Why not?
Violation of the
Well,
First
if you believe in
Amendment.
free speech, I wouldn't want to have you vetted for that.
Yeah, but if you believe in free speech, why don't we put a 5-year-old on the air as an anchor?
You could.
How about a 15? How about Justin Bieber? He wants to get on the air. Why
No,
not?
he's a moron.
Not interested.
Why do you say he's a moron? Free speech. Howard just said free speech.
Not interested.
But nobody would watch it.
Now you're on to something. Okay,
No money
if
then.
you leave with nothing else tonight, nobody would watch it. Are you kidding?
The teams would.
Think about this for a minute. Maybe this crowd wouldn't,
The teams would.
but if Justin Bieber or Kim Kardashian said something with credibility and panache and even sex appeal to get your eye on television, you're telling me you wouldn't watch? I think you would.
But it might not be a news person.
It might. What if? What if Kim Kardashian or Justin Bieber tomorrow says, I've come to my senses and I want to do news now, I want to leave straight entertainment? Would you watch?
No.
Here's the key. Maybe
They
yes,
would get
maybe
on
no.
the air.
Maybe yes, maybe no. Here's the key. It's what is credible. Credible. Justin Bieber, at least at this stage in his life, has blown it for credibility in the academic field of news. It doesn't mean he couldn't, but he'd have a tough climb to start learning stuff, including foreign policy and everything else. So it boils down to credibility. Are you credible? And within that arena, that's what I've got to go on. If I'm not credible, pretty soon I'm going to get the hook. Pretty soon, it doesn't matter if I've got a license or not. I don't have a job if I'm not credible. So people who want a job and stay on the air work really hard at being credible. Let me give you an example. Rachel Maddow. Let me do Rachel Maddow. Now, we got to really remember, during the Obama years, and everything is pushing into the camera, right? Everything is forward, forward. She's trying to sell all day long. So when you really think about it, and all this gestation, right? The gestures are all over the place. Let me give you a politician. Beto. All right, here's Beto to get your attention. Skateboard, he goes across, he goes to the dentist, gets the plaque off his teeth and puts it on the internet, gets a haircut, puts that on the internet, and he jumps up on the table and does he get your attention? He doesn't get your attention, but he's running for the presidency and he's still in the game.
How can he do that? He has felonies.
We're in a surreal world, my friend.
I know.
These are part of the problems.
I know.
So, is he credible? Not to you, but go Beto. I have a cousin who is a tax attorney in San Francisco. Distant cousin. He actually is the cousin of my husband. So by marriage, I have a cousin. He's pro Beto.
Unbelievable.
Big leftist, lefty, pro Beto. Young, energized, is going to be Ted Cruz. Of course, he didn't. But then he decides to jump off the high board and be the president because he couldn't beat Ted Cruz. I mean, it's crazy, right? If you're credible enough to somebody, somebody's going to vote for you. And that's for politicians, that's for journalists. Does it mean you're getting the truth? Maybe yes, maybe no.
But isn't that what credible is? Truth.
Yeah, credible is believable.
But truth.
No, truth is truth.
Right.
Truth is truth.
Right.
And we all said a prayer through Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So I assume most in the room
Yes.
are Christian.
Absolutely.
So we go out on faith to go to that truth, right? Especially if we pray, right? We go out on faith when we salute the flag. Because this represents a truth to the extent that we can have it in the world of the best government, formed of government that man has ever known. Even beating the Greeks and Romans with the Roman Senate. It's the best you can get. And it's flawed, but it's the best we can do. So truth is one thing. Believability or credibility is how can I convince you on my truth or my message? Let's put it that way, my message. Because we in the news business are in the messaging game. It's a message. That's all it is. And some people have a perception that what I'm saying right now is credible. Other people may be asleep. I didn't say something enough to keep them awake, for starters. So it's all in the messaging. Howard.
Congress used a bunch of children the other week to talk about climate change to make it sound credible.
Mm-hmm.
Had all these kids up there crying that they're not gonna live to have children and everything else.
That's credible.
Let's talk about that for a minute.
Was that entertainment or was?
Well, let's talk about that. Remember, entertainment doesn't have to be a ha-ha, funny, Jerry Seinfeld, Archie Bunker. Am I entertaining you right now?
Yes.
I haven't cracked one joke. I'm engaging. You see? So let's talk about that climate change stuff. All right, here we have an issue. Climate change. Oh my goodness, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. AOC says 12 years. And all hell's gonna break loose. Do you believe her?
Manipulation by fear.
I'll tell you, the left does. Or shall I say, leftists, young leftist millennials do.
Obama bought a house. Obama bought a house on an ocean front. Just bought a house. Lived for years. I buy a house on an ocean front.
Maybe he wants some oceanfront property he wants to sell you someday. That was a joke.
I know, I'm just saying.
Okay, so to drive Howard's point home, recently a 15-year-old girl with a long braid from Sweden addressed climate change at the United Nations. Now, you might say, wow, who gave her that platform? She must be a really good, she must have won debate classes in high school. She's a phenom, okay? Guess what? She did have a little practice. She addressed her own Swedish parliament with the tears and the angst. And you don't understand. Okay, now, let's talk about that effect. How many people like babies and dogs?
Oh, yeah.
How many politicians kiss babies and dogs?
Yeah.
Even have the dog's lap on them like this. My favorite dog is a pug. And sometimes when I go to rallies and if a politician has a pug, I love the politician because I just love pugs. Okay? Pugs, or maybe babies and dogs, they're props. Well, a 15-year-old girl who's kind of still a baby because she's 15, she's not really an adult, perfect. Because she can understand some of the adult stuff, get her out there, have her emote. It's my future. All you care about is the economy.
How dare you?
How dare you? How dare you rob my childhood? Okay. I don't know. Did I rob your childhood? I think your mom robbed your childhood when she threw you into an adult arena where you have to talk about a complex issue. Somebody didn't hold you back. Somebody made you an adult before you should have been. Because this is a really difficult issue. And who made you a meteorologist anyway, Greta? But it works. See, it's a show. It's a show. And unfortunately, we have too much show. You know, sometimes I was talking to a colleague of mine in New York, and I said, you know, sometimes I really think that what would help our democracy, help our republic, and not continue to kill democracy, is if we hired really plain Janes and plain Charlies, no makeup, just the news. And if they had any gesturing or big eyes or looking into the camera, they're fired. Just be readers. You know, in Japan they have that. South Korea they have that. They just read the news. And you want the yak, you turn to another station or another time.
Wait a minute.
But we don't.
How would you do that with all my Democrats?
I said in my ideal world, I was talking to a friend and I said, would that it would be so. There's a great Italian word, it's magari. It means would that it would be so. We don't have such a word but I love that word. Because it's like, it's surreal, it's fanciful. Les?
Question I have on that is, so you get this stoic person standing up there, sitting up there reading the news. Who wrote the news?
There you
And
go.
from what perspective?
And that's also important. But it's a start, isn't it?
But because is the person that wrote it, you may be credible, but you may be reading something that.
Very insightful remark. Very insightful remark. Because when I was an anchor, I wrote some of my stuff, but so did other writers. And they gave it to me. I had to read it over and, and I vetted. If it didn't sound right to me, based on, to the extent that I knew it, based on how much I knew of the community, fire department, chief of police, who's got their hand in the cookie jar, I wasn't going to go with it. Because it's my voice that's giving it.
Do you have that choice?
Another good question. Can I give you a real interesting question? Back in the olden days when I was when I wasn't an old fart. Back in the olden days when I was working a job in TV news, I was an anchor, and it was about 5 minutes to 6, and I had to do the 6 o'clock news. And this is a true story, and I won't tell you what market it's over. It's the owner of the station happened to have walked in to the newsroom. Highly unusual. Most people at the station would leave at 5. They'd go home, they'd drive home, and it was just the anchors that were there, and sometimes some of the reporters that were doing evening reporting, because I did the 6 o'clock and the 11 o'clock. The owner of the station walks in, I'm at my computer, and I feel this breathing over my right shoulder, and I look up, and he's standing right there, pretty close too. No, it wasn't sexual harassment, but he was reading what was on my computer. And he says, "Are you leading with that, Terry?" And I said, yeah. It's a great story. He said, he walked around. Okay, so here I'm at my desk. He's here. He walks around and he looks at me. He says, "Tell me again you're leading with that." I said, "Yes, it's our lead." He says, "No, it's not." He said, "The man in your copy," because it's copy, right? The teleprompter gets a copy, I get a copy, the producer in the booth gets a copy. The man in your copy that you're saying has been arrested for fraud, hand in the cookie jar, kind of deep, bad stuff. And this is your exciting lead that you're breaking this. He was my best friend and in my wedding as my best man. Okay? And he looked at me like, "And what are you going to do about it?" And now it's about 3 minutes to 6. Thank God I had some makeup on. But I got to go way over there to the studio. And I took it, I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened to Charlie." "Really? Gee, you must be heartbroken." And I kept walking. I didn't know what to do, but my heart was pounding. That was my first encounter. I was very young. That was my first encounter where somebody, the owner of the station, did not want that out. He didn't threaten me. I went with it. But let me tell you something. It was very uncomfortable. Because he didn't want his best friend, his best man, leading the 6 o'clock news. And the only thing I could say, because I still believed it, I saw the police report. This was a big investigation. And we got it. Channel 5 got it. So I grabbed the copy and said, "I'm so sorry that happened." "Oh, you must be heartbroken. Have you called him?" "You should call him." And I'm going into the studio. So it happens.
That would have been good.
But it's the truth.
Yeah. And he's the best man he's the best friend of the owner of this station. In all full disclosure. Right?
Should we investigate him too?
Can you imagine if that happened?
All right.
Full disclosure.
I want to talk just a little bit about one thing and just get your read on it. Okay. Let's talk about Fox for just a minute. It just turns out that I know a number of people at Fox. I've actually had appearances on Fox News, which is kind of a coveted ask. I'm very proud of that. I've been on their air as a commentator, and sometimes they'll call up TV hosts, news talk hosts, and they'll say, "In your Milwaukee community, what do you think of this? Well, they called me up in Phoenix. Trump was coming to town, something about the border. Let's get Terry's take on it. So I said, great. So I go down and I do it. It's all great. And I'm on TV and wow, wow, wow. And that all helps the resume and everybody loved it. After that was over, and in my travels to New York, I've been in the Fox News studios. And they, by the way, today they rolled out a really new flash look to the studios, which is really nice. They got these long pillars with all their stars on them. That's a really nice area, by the way. But you go down this elevator, and the studios themselves are pretty small because television magnifies everything, right? Anyway, here's some of the cubbies, and here's some more cubbies over there, and there's somebody's room over there, somebody's office if you're high enough. But most people are kind of in cubbies and they're working, and you can see the talent kind of walk through to get to a studio, of which there's about 4 or 5 studios. And the women are pretty scantily dressed, in case you haven't noticed. And I'm sure you have. Oh, you haven't noticed? Don't lie. Don't lie. Don't be not credible now. I'm just kidding. Okay, well, now, some would say, that's great because it's going to get people to watch. And I would say, you're right. You're right. The cleavage, the hair, the false eyelashes, the Kimberly Guilfoyle leg on the 5. It's like she's got, what is that called when you've got restless legs? Right? All of that works for vision, television. We people in radio have to make it without the vision. Our words have to create the story. So it's harder. But some people say you lose your credibility as a serious broadcaster when there's too much flamboyant sex appeal.
No.
I don't think so.
Ruby?
My late husband used to call the Fox women news bunnies.
As in Hugh Hefner? Bunnies? What do we think, men?
Just they call him Foxy.
Foxy, there you go. You're so funny tonight. I should give him the mic. What do we think about that?
We tune in to watch, but not listen.
Exactly, you make my point. Exactly.
Combination of all.
So I guess
I
the
hear
question
what you're
is,
saying.
is it overdone? Especially with the ladies. Is it overdone? I saw someone on TV today, I swear to God, she had some green thing off the shoulder, some green thing on, it looked like polka. Did you see it? It was the weirdest thing, naked shoulder, completely naked shoulder, like she was going to some kind of junior prom. It was strange. I thought, wow, now I've seen it all.
I had a friend comment once, she said that they all look like hookers.
High-class call girls, I've been told.
Yeah.
And having seen them in the flesh, and some of them are my friends, you gotta say, what's going on here? And then, when the Me Too movement comes, with all respect and honor to you men in the room, you got a guy like Bill O'Reilly that's doing this, and makes a comment on a beautiful black woman that walks by, he's off the air. He's off the air.
Why?
I'm not Roger Ailes, but he's off the air. He was sued. He was sued, sexual harassment and all of that.
Obvious why.
What the point I'm getting at is, if you're going to be credible, how far do you go? Also, not just with your words, with your appearance. I met this man tonight. He comes in, he's beautifully dressed. He's credible when he tells me he's in security. I can tell instantly, to your credit. He's credible to me. He's in security. I believe you. I believe you.
Where do you get to know him?
I believe him.
Wait till he starts talking to you.
I believe him.
Ready he is.
He's handsome too. Okay, so, you know, sometimes I ask guys this about the Fox News babes, as they're called. And I use the example of Janine Pirro. When I would come in on Saturday and Sunday nights on KFYI, we had like a bunch of televisions on, smart TVs on mute. But I would see her, She had her opening monologue and stuff. And some of the Saturday night dress she wore,
Oh, yeah.
if I wore that, I would have been fired as an anchor like that. And I know she's doing commentary. She's a judge. She's a judge.
I've always thought she was in bad taste. The way she
Now,
dresses.
we may like what she has to say. Tough. She's going to get him. She's a prosecutor. She's a judge. But how does the left look at it? Remember, it's not just us that's looking. Now, I don't want to pick on Fox. I've been on Fox. I like Fox, okay? But think about this. Think about it. Think about it with Chris Cuomo. He goes to a restaurant and is dropping all kinds of F-bombs. He's a public figure. This is your anchor? We don't like that. You know, Fredo, you know. You know, I have a clause in my contract with Salem. It's a conduct clause. They own my behavior or I am fired. And that's the way it should be, just like cops, just like attorneys. At least there's some semblance of a license, or at least a bar, a standard. Does that make sense? Some of the messages that I'd like you to leave with tonight is we're in this world of really looking at messaging is everything. Is everything. It's how you look, it's your hair. I used to have a female boss. She was one of the, at another station, a general manager was female. I mean, she would look at my hair all the time. Send me to certain, I had to have a bob, it had to be on one side. And I go, hair. But then you look at the takes, you look at this little box here. She didn't want my hair too long, this long, droopy, too immature. They wanted you adult enough, smart enough, you know, and a business suit all the time, heels all the time. My legs hurt when I went home at night. 8 hours in heels. I'm sitting at the desk, sure. But you had to be turned out. That's not the case today. And we had great ratings because people would look and go, that's a professional station. When Roger Ailes opened Fox, the look was more professional, traditionally professional, which is of course the man look, suits, right, than it is today. Now, maybe you think, so what? Okay, we should talk about that. But just know the times they are changing. And it all goes to how well you sell the story. It's a sales job. You can oversell it like Rachel Maddow, in my opinion. You can be really biased, like Don Lemon, in my opinion. You can be overdone, too much cleavage on Judge Janine at times, in my opinion. It's how you sell it.
Look at Steve Hilton, t-shirt and skirt coat.
And you know what? He's on Sunday night.
Yeah.
Casual.
Yeah.
You're out in you just mowed the lawn, so you come in and watch Steve. He's cool. He's the cool Brit.
Yeah.
It depends on how it's marketed, how it's selling.
And you'll see now, you see a lot of guests on that don't wear a tie.
Mm-hmm.
And
We got Andrew, what's his name? Yang, who didn't wear a tie to the debate.
right.
It's how you message yourself for the greatest audience.
Yeah,
Politics or not.
That's part of the message.
Yes,
Giving
absolutely.
away money.
How well you speak, how your hair is, how your bad breath is or isn't, the shoes you wear, the clothes you wear, the gestures you have, the education you have, the whole 9 yards. Everything is messaging. Everything.
When you have a public today that's been very seriously challenged with a lack of education, with the kind of education they're getting where discernment is out the window, they are even more impressionable.
True. And whose fault is that?
I mean, I hate to, I'm well educated and I also.
Yes, you are. You knew the Hegelian dialectic. You do get the gold star tonight.
But that's not the point. The point is,
That is the point. You are educated.
I can discern what they're saying.
And you can read through it.
Exactly.
While you're vetting credibility.
Mm-hmm.
You can call BS, whereas young people can't. And part of it is a lot of it's not their fault. Look at public schools.
Well, that's the dumbing down of America, and now you've really got it.
And these are the issues we need to talk about. You know, I was saying to Les, when I came early tonight, you know, with all this politics all the time, don't you think we're kind of in the weeds a lot? nitpicking on every single tiny little bit all the time.
I think we're at war.
Yeah, well, we are. But we're kind of losing the forest for the trees. And by that I mean, why are we driving home the Joe Biden story? Why? Why? Because if he becomes the president, it's the creep of socialism. That's why. Or the repeat of Obama. That's why. That's the issue, folks.
It's dementia.
That's the issue. We got to remember the big picture. Go ahead.
He has dementia. He's not.
Well, I don't know that he has dementia.
But no, I had a psychiatrist who studied,
I would say, well, dementia, from what I know, what I've studied, is a spectrum. He probably has some early senility, then dementia, then Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
And
but yeah, there was a psychiatrist who does a comment.
they say Trump's mentally ill, so there you go.
No, but this came from a psychiatrist who was in the military, worked with CIA, so.
You know, I wish Charles Krauthammer was still around.
Yeah.
He was a psychiatrist. He pegged Obama pretty good.
Yeah, he did.
Go ahead.
Do you know about neuro-linguistic programming?
Euro?
We're talking
Neuro.
science.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, neuro, yes, yeah. I thought you said Euro.
The news is science. And let me quote Dr. Henry Kissinger. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. What matters is if they believe it, unquote.
Is that my talk tonight or what? Is that my talk tonight or what?
Yes.
Now, by the same token, you can fool some of the people some of the time, none of the people none of the time, and how does it go? All the people never, or however it goes. So it depends on the messaging and how far you can go with it. In some respects, we're in Emperor's New Clothes. I truly thought Obama was Emperor's New Clothes. I didn't see it. I didn't see it. 2 years in the U.S. Senate, never voted for one thing, and now he's running? Really? I didn't see it.
Can I
Okay.
say something?
But other people said he's so wonderful. Is this? I think it's puffery. But it depends on what you believe.
In terms of marketing, they sold us an alleged homosexual black Osama or Obama or whatever was, what else? With the birth certificate thing, right? And several other issues.
And you know what one of those issues was? He'll be the first black president. So we've had all of these whites over here. Guess what? We're going to tack on this side and get something different. Hillary Clinton, different.
Really?
No, they were.
Never mind the bleach bit on the 33,000 emails, 66,000 emails. Never mind Uba Abedin. Never mind the private server. She's a woman.
Benghazi.
Never mind. Never mind Benghazi. She's a woman. Because she's different.
Look at
You get the
Trump.
point? Trump's different.
Way out.
Way out there.
He's, it's one thing.
And you know what?
He does it. Nobody else does it.
You know what's so
He
interesting?
fights with them.
And that's different.
He looks true.
He doesn't kiss babies and dogs. Oh, he might a little bit. He might.
I sometimes get like,
He's different. And people are going, we need a fighter. In fact, we need a street brawler.
what he is.
There you go. Okay, questions? Should we wrap here or talk about my dad or?
I want to go back to the beginning. You're talking about Walter Cronkite, and from the time I can remember until he died or got off the line, Paul Harvey. I keep looking for another Paul Harvey. He was. Did anybody not like Paul Harvey?
Good day.
Yeah, I mean, he had his 5-minute, 15-minute broadcasts, and.
No, I didn't like him, I loved him.
The rest of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the rest of the story.
And that's the rest of the story. You know, with Terry's take on the topics, I try to do a little Paul Harvey. If any of you here, I do a 90-second. They gave me 2 minutes, but then we got more advertising, so we wanted me to crunch it. That's why I talk pretty fast. What's that? So I try to do that with passion and aplomb and have a beginning, middle, and end and a take and all of that. So, but he was wildly popular.
And he wrote his own stuff.
I write my own stuff too.
Yeah, you write your own stuff, but he wrote his own stuff. So if it was good, it was his. If it was bad, it was his.
Mhm. You own it.
He owned it, and there's no Paul Hart, there's, on that scale, other than people like.
And you know also why he came on the scene and was so popular? Because we only got half an hour from 6 o'clock till 6:30 on CBS. And so there is the rest of the story. And he would have neat stories that couldn't be crammed into the rundown of the 6 o'clock news because, well, Vietnam made the rundown, the economy, the stock market. I mean, then we were done. We ran out of time.
He was so often with his narratives, he was the antithesis of what was going on for today.
Yeah.
I mean,
He was the extra,
he
the
was
frosting on the
it's-
cake. Yeah.
Think about him. God made a farmer. The narrative then is, and God made a farmer, and then the other one is, if I were the devil. If you remember those things. See, he was going against the grain. He was going
You're
against
right.
the thesis at the time. He was the antithesis.
He was the antithesis, and as long as the antithesis sits there and stews, it becomes the new it becomes a synthesis of the left and the right, and then we kind of move through time and space, so now you got a new thesis, a new synthesis, and that becomes the new thesis. And then we tack left or tack right. And that's life. That's life. So if you want to go out on the horizon and say, well, what is the news going to be like tomorrow? In some respects, it's the last man talking. Have you ever been in an argument and somebody says, well, rah, 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 and they're yakking at you, and you come right back? That means you're still in the game. You're still in the game. The last person, free speech, you can win arguments by continuing to talk. Stay in the game. Filibuster in politics.
When I came back from Vietnam, I pegged all the anchors as not journalists, not news people. I pegged them as really good readers who could read whatever they put up in a minute. In other words, they could be on the air and a breaking news story could come on and they could read it like they were actually there telling you all
That's
about
a skill.
it. And that was their talent. Not that they knew what they were reading, but they could read it like you would.
Like you pick up a phone book and make it come alive.
You can make it work. And
We should call that rip and
I
read.
looked at all the
It's called
anchors-
rip and read, yes.
I looked at all the anchors as they were just good readers. That's how I
But
pegged them.
if they start speaking Greek, you're not going to believe them. You're not even going to understand them, much less believe them.
Well,
So they
they're
have to
writing.
have a certain amount of knowledge. That's the credibility. And now I'm going to tell you a little story, real quick little story. One night when I was reading the news on the teleprompter, and I still am a very good cold reader. And it's a skill. You just practice it. You don't read this way, you read this way. Your eye sees big chunks of information. Okay? And sometimes you'll have an and or a pregnant pause or 3 dots, a run-on sentence, but it's your way of communicating. The lights went out. We had a nor'easter, there was no electricity. My boss came in with a candle. The generator started the camera going again, but my overhead lights, I had no lights. He put a candle right there. I had to not only know that script so well, I had to move the candle by candlelight and talk into the camera. All right? Because if you don't know your copy, I would be deer caught in the headlights. And there goes my credibility. Because somebody over yonder, they didn't get the lights out in this nor'easter, snowstorm. Before anchors go on the air, they're looking at their copy. Don't think Brett Baer isn't.
I think they all are, but
They have to.
None of them were at the story. They all got the information over the wire. And they all had to learn to read it.
When I came up in the
way
ranks,
that
I had to go out and report and pull stories myself. I had to do that. Now other people worked and then they handed it to me. But that is the hardcore, boots on the ground, shoe leather reporting. Brett Baer knows his stuff. Believe me, he knows it.
Yeah, he's excellent.
You have to know it. If you're saying this every night, you come to know it.
I
But
think
your
Tucker
point is well
Carlson
made
knows
because
his
some
stuff.
of them are just readers. That's true. That's
I
true.
think Tucker Carlson knows his stuff.
Absolutely.
I think he knows. And I think he knows it to the point where he can argue with any guest that he brings on.
I agree.
Well, the question is, do you know it well enough to go ad lib? Can you add? It's like a singer, a cappella, without the piano there. You just know that middle C and you go from there. Opera singers can do that. Well, a lot of singers can do that.
No, but I think that's why they're on the air. They have that ability, that
They're
talent.
on the air because they have the skills, the physique, the voice, the whole shebang to sell the product. Sell the product. Because in the end, I have to get your attention. I have to sell it to that guy way in the back. I use my voice for that. I use inflection. I use my eyes. I use interesting stories.
Sell
I
commercials.
work the room. It's all part of messaging.
Sell the commercials.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. Going back to the wardrobe thing, do they tell you how to dress? I mean, do they have a wardrobe on site there where they all pick out?
Good question. Depends on the station and the expense account of the station. Nationally, many times they do, and it depends on the contract. There could be in various different contracts. Please take the suggestion of our wardrobe people. Sounds like Hollywood, doesn't it? Sounds like the theater, doesn't it? Sounds like a movie set, doesn't it?
Pretty coordinated there.
But, you know, maybe the celebrity says, I don't really like black. I never wear black near my face or whatever. You know, when you're it is show business, let's face it.
Yeah.
When you're a performer, if you're going to be successful over a period of time, you know what works for your body, for your color palette, your color chart, etc. So it depends on the contract and the budget, of course, to have different jackets and.
Yeah, I think Janine is, I'm sorry, but I think she's great. And I know y'all not saying she isn't, but I'm just saying, I guess.
No, she is great. She's just an example.
Yeah,
I mean, look at
understand
Megyn
what
Kelly,
you do.
for crying out loud. I mean,
I don't even see what she wears, she's so good, I just listen to what she says and how.
men see what she wears.
I bet they do, which is fine. I mean, that's.
You're credible because you didn't lie.
Bring more men in there.
Howard.
But, you know, what she says is very
Howard.
dynamic and I believe it.
You talk about appearances. I'm a big fan of Harris Faulkner, but the whole time she's talking, I'm mesmerized by her eyes.
Yeah.
Well, it's false eyelashes,
some other
huge
beautiful
eyebrows, a
eyes.
lot of eye makeup.
I don't care what she's saying. I'm looking at her eyes.
Well, okay.
That's because you're a
Okay.
man.
She's
But
batting
yeah,
her eyelids
That's
at you.
right. And so, see, Roger had it right. He wanted to grab people. It's television. It's the picture.
Yeah.
That's different than the radio. In the radio, it's theater of the mind. I have to create the story with my voice to grab you, and my ears have to be very acute when somebody is calling, or Les has listened to me for years, before we even became friends.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about radio, and I've been in the studio several times with different people, you know, Charles Grant, you know, other people.
You're talking KFYI.
You know, and
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
and that is not easy.
Tell me about it.
I mean, it's, you know, and Howard was, you know, the board office stuff, but to sit there and come up with just an hour and keep it interesting.
When I worked on News Talk 1010, it was 3 hours right after, well, it was right after 9/11, and we cranked it. I started 2 hours and we cranked it up to 3 hours during the drum beat to Shock and Awe.
Yeah.
And you have to prep. I'm telling you, you better really get you know, for a 3 hour show, you better have 9 topics at least.
The thing that was
At least.
The thing that was most concerning and frightening to me, as I was sitting there, was that I was gonna say something that wasn't right. I was gonna tell a lie. I was gonna say something, I was gonna misinform people. I was gonna essentially lose credibility.
Mhm.
By making, and I'm talking about making an honest mistake. An honest mistake, you can sometimes lose your credibility. That terrified me. That's part of the reason I didn't
There's an old saying in radio, in talk radio anyway, for every hour you're on the air, you need to put in 3 hours of study. And bring your product in. If it's statistics, get that yellower out, that highlighter, that Sharpie out. You gotta have it tripping, or at least you need it here, enough to understand before you regurgitate the information. And believe me, there's times I over-prepared because, guess what? I was sensing my audience didn't really want to talk about that. And then I've got to ebb and flow. People will go like this, oh, she's on about education, poo, I want to talk about the Iraq War.
When Jack McLam was up in Idaho at the Randy Weaver deal, Randy Weaver when they murdered his wife, I was the conduit for John Dale on KFYI.
Oh, were you?
And John was very kind because John was from Idaho, but I was getting second and third hand information. There was no cell phones then. You know, there were very, very few cell phones. Communication was very difficult. Jack was up there with Bo, and he would call Theresa Hubner, who was his secretary, who helped him a lot. Then she would call me and give me the information. Then John would call me to find out what was going on. And I'll tell you, that's scary. That responsibility fell on me.
May I elaborate on that? If you are calling someone, that means that someone needs to be credible. Now, let's say I'm calling the chief of police, and he's corrupt. Let's say I'm calling the fire department, and some firefighter's sleeping and doesn't know what the hell's going on. Let's say I'm calling James Comey. Or any deep throat. They have to be credible. This is where we're at. And the people don't get to know to the extent that you can give it to them.
And I don't think some of the people that are coming up doing what I was doing much more bigger, larger scale, are even thinking about it, quite frankly. I don't think that they even think about it.
How are we going to have an educated electorate if they don't know who to trust? Seriously. And try to put yourself in the left's point of view. Seriously. Let's not be at war. Let's try to listen, hear what's chapping their hide. What is chapping their hide? They think Hunter Biden didn't make any money. He was on the board of directors for free. That's not what's being reported. I had somebody hit my Facebook wall and say I had rocks in my head.
He's getting 80,000 a week.
Not according to this woman. Do your research, Ms. Gilberg. Well, I'll tell you, I get slings and arrows, let me tell you, believe me.
Well, some people hear what they want to hear.
Of course, and we like what we are used to. Those two things are true. We hear what we want to hear, and we like what we're used to.
You don't like surprises.
If you're growing up in a Republican household, maybe you joined Students for a Democratic Society, but then you came back, right? When you went off to college. You like what you come home to what you know.
How can we have an educated electorate if they don't know who the first president of the United States is?
Yeah, there you go.
I consider that part of my job to tell them.
Well,
Whether or not they
all these
believe
other
me
things-
is another story.
You know, when all these hosts go out and ask questions, or have somebody go ask questions, these people,
Jaywalking, right?
and it's just amazing.
You mean work the crowd, or man on the street. It's called
Man on the street.
MOSs.
Yeah.
It's called MOSs, where you go out in New York City and you say, you know, what do you think about this? I'm Waters World. This is my world. And you do this. You do this number.
That's a copy of jaywalking now.
Yeah. You know who was great at it? Phil Donahue. He worked the room like nobody's business. He would run to the next.
Yeah.
It was great television.
Terry.
Ron.
Your father and most of our fathers were in World War II, and you know, they call it the greatest generation.
For a reason.
These people went through a depression, they went through a world war, and I don't know how they managed to keep their sanity.
You keep
But
talking about me, Ron.
Tell the greatest generation is Joe. But tell us about your trip to
Okay, sure.
Normandy.
Let's segue a little bit, and we can talk about the 75th anniversary of D-Day. All right, everybody in this room knows about D-Day. Our younger people don't, so we need to keep history alive and tell them, right? So this was a extremely important anniversary because, frankly, if we were going to honor D-Day in the 100th anniversary, the old timers will not be with us, right? They're dying off. Used to be the soldiers from World War I were dying off, but now World War II, they're gone. Well, anyway, there was a film producer in San Diego. She does documentary films on the military. We got to know each other. She knew about me. She kind of found me on LinkedIn. And she knew that I am an Air Force brat. My father was career Air Force. And she said, I'd be interested in finding out about what your dad did. And I said, well, I'd be interested to tell you. She says, well, I'm actually going to D-Day in Normandy, and President Trump will be there, Macron will be there, Theresa May will be there, all the big shots will be there. And I am filming some of the old timers that are still with us. And they're from the 82nd and they're from the 101st. Basically the parajumpers, the paratroopers, airborne. But you have such an interesting background. Tell me about your father who was a glider pilot. So I did, and I said, I'm gonna do one better. I'm gonna be going. So we connected over there, and as she is filming, she put me on camera, and I started to talk about being the daughter of a glider pilot. So the upshot of that was that she's filming and filming and filming, and she made a movie about some of the old timers that came back and jumped out of some of the old timer planes, like the D-Day doll, like the Miss Montana, and these other C-47 aircraft, bombers, etc., which got all oiled up in the last couple of years so that they could make the trip, because they're old-timer machines too, make the trip across the Atlantic and across the Channel. And some of the old-timers were going to try to jump out of these planes. In fact, a man named Tom Rice, who became the star of the movie, 97 years old, jumped on D-Day, jumped on the 75th anniversary, parajumped. So all of this is in the movie. Then we went over to a glider, an old glider. She put me in the glider, and I started talking about my dad. And it just so happens, now that you mention it, the movie is edited. It's called Libertas, Normandy Jump 2019. And it is being aired in Prescott on an early screening in California and in Arizona on Wednesday night. So I will go up. I made the cut. In other words, the documentary decided to use my interview. So let's talk about my dad. My dad was a farm boy from Montana. When the war was getting bad and the United States decided to get in the war, he went to college. He was 25 and they trained him to be a pilot on gliders. How many people in the room do not know what a glider is? It's a different kind of aircraft.
No engine.
It has no engine at all. It's basically a wooden box which was towed by a bomber or a C-47. Sometimes bombers, but mostly it was C-47s. So the idea was really promoted by Hitler. Hitler loved gliders. The Nazis used gliders. The Brits used gliders. And Churchill used a lot of gliders in Sicily in the lower Mediterranean before we entered the war. But with all of that said, the United States kind of learned from Germans and from the Brits about how to make really good gliders, to the extent that they could be good. Very perilous. A glider is pulled by a rope which is attached to the C-47, and the idea was to go from England. At first they were going to go through the cliffs of Dover, that area, but when our government decided that we weren't going to do the invasion at Calais, but rather at Normandy, the idea of gliders and the 81st, 82nd, and the 101st all came by way of Normandy across the Channel. So the first that went out was the Pathfinders. These were guys that jumped out of planes in the complete darkness, and they had flares. There were some Pathfinders, to my knowledge, that were ships, but it was the way to sort of say, okay, we've made it here in Normandy, and here comes the 82nd and the 101st. Behind the 82nd and the 101st were glider planes. And the gliders brought medicine, ammunition, daggers, rifles, water, rations, anything they could to help the paratroopers that had just descended behind enemy lines. That was the idea. So Dad worked in Operation Overlord, which was the Normandy invasion. And he landed, I saw the area where we think, the coordinates where we think he landed, behind enemy lines coming across Utah Beach. Now, there's a lot of farm pasture, if any of you have been to Normandy, and you got to take this plane down once the rope is cut. Now you drop the rope, the C-47 goes back to England, and you're taking this plane with sometimes soldiers, most of the time supplies, down to skirt on its belly and hopefully not crash on impact. Many men died, many pilots died. And so did the troops if they were inside. And so did all of the supplies, just destroyed. But how are you going to get across the Atlantic Wall? You got to fly across. Or, if you're part of the Saving Private Ryan amphibious troops, everybody's seen Saving Private Ryan, you were going to come up from the beaches and say your Hail Marys, because chances are very good you're going to get slaughtered on the beach. We did a kind of a blitz. Hitler was very big on blitz, well, so were we. And that's just to come in, air, sea, and land, etc., and that was the whole idea. So my dad survived. He did Operation Overlord. Then, and that was in June of 44, then in August of 44 was Operation Dragoon, which was southern France. He was a glider pilot again. His job, once he finished Operation Overlord, was to get himself back to the beach with the French resistance, or however he could get back. In many respects, he kind of hid in foxholes until he could get back. And then he made it back to the shore and got back to England, and his next assignment was Operation Dragoon, which was southern France. And this was about the time Paris was liberated. He survived that. So he had a guardian angel on. Then he makes it back to England, and he does Operation Market Garden in Holland. Survives that. That was a disaster. We lost Market. We lost that battle, but of course we won the war. Anyway, and then his fourth mission was Operation Varsity, which was crossing the Rhine. And that was in 45. I believe it was March of 45, and Hitler committed suicide April of 45. So once the Allies were coming in to hone in on Germany, of course Hitler knew it was over. It was soon to be over. He didn't talk about this, as most men of World War II. There was something, I don't know if they were kind of thought, I know too much stuff or too much top secret stuff. I don't know why, but the Greatest Generation didn't talk. They didn't talk. So I grew up.
They had no words for it.
I think they never wanted to go back to that. They just wanted to get on with their lives, have a family, have children, move on in the 50s.
Was so horrific.
So
They
horrific.
had no words.
So horrific.
And then the mission to take care of their family and do their job.
And move on,
was
get a job,
far-
get on with life.
Right, it was a far greater importance.
Right.
But the downfall to that was that I grew up, oh yeah, my dad was in the war, yeah. I grew up on Air Force bases. I was born in the Philippines at Clark Air Force Base, and then every about 3 to 4 years we would move. Yeah, my dad, I'd see all the other Air Force kids, neighborhood kids. What'd your dad do in the war? I don't know, he was in the war, I didn't know. I didn't know until I got to be an adult, because my dad did not really tell us. And he wasn't alone. I started studying his military record, and oh my God, you were decorated with the orange lanyard from the Queen of Holland, Queen Beatrice. The orange lanyard? Are you kidding? Oh yeah. And I'd go into the library, to his library, and it would be a shadow box full of his medals. He was highly decorated. He stayed in the Air Force, and he was a Minuteman missile man. If you know anything about that, how many have been in a missile silo? Interesting, huh? I've been in a missile silo when I was in the 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade. We'd take our cousins. It was kind of cool. So my dad was a Minuteman missile man, and then he became a commander of a SAC Air Force bases, SAC commander for the rest of his career.
If you have no further questions of Terry.
Thank you very much for being such a great receptive audience.
Thank you so much.
I hope that I left you with something that you can chew on the way home. I hope it was educational. Thank you very much.